Well, greetings everybody. Welcome to our King's channel. I went to sleep here last Wednesday, before sunset anyway, and I woke up sometime and I paid patronage to the bathroom. I went to bed and I woke up here. It was already Sabbath, or just a couple minutes shy, 8:01 p.m. I had woke up. So I slept pretty well, but I went back to sleep for a few more minutes, didn't get up till a little after 9 o'clock. And I have to say, it was one of the best sleeps I think I've ever had. I put a bunch of moringa oil on my back and on my aching shoulder, and I guess it relieved it enough that I just went out, and it was quite a blessing. I do say an apology here because I had said the next video from the one before would be to Elon Musk in an offer. However, because it is Sabbath, I'm not going to do any business dealings or anything of that sort during the Sabbath. It's not in me, and hopefully it's not in you to do either. So I figured what I should bring out a little bit on is this gathering that's going to take place, and I'm not certain if it's going to take place all at one time. What I'm thinking is maybe, as y'all may know now, that I actually own Texas. Contracts make the law, and there's a contract filed in the court showing that I own Texas. And it was filed there as evidence against me, but they tried to put me in prison for 10 years over it, and then they ultimately murdered me here back in 2016, starving me for 44 days, and our king rescued me on the 44th day. And so, that's evidence as well that the bill, the contractual agreement, shows that I actually own Texas. And hopefully before too long, we'll get the help that we need to ratify such. And there's going to be a lot of changes in Texas. No one will be forced out, but they will not be allowed to eat unclean things or anything of that sort. And Texas will rescind from the United States, becoming its own country. From what I see and perceive, I guess I should say. And whether any of that comes to pass or not, I can't tell you that it absolutely will. It's all up to our king. And if this has been a work of me, going through all that I've gone through during my life and believing that it was our chiefest attorney, as well as physician, that was leading me into all these papers. I didn't only have an attorney when I first started out on the journey, because I knew nothing about how to conduct oneself in a court, never been to one, so... And until they put my dog in my house and burned it down around her ears, and I tried to get him to pay, and the courts all in conspiracy and such didn't even allow me to get what was coming to me, I set my mind upon knowing man's law the most that I could, because, there's over 40 million laws in every state of this United States of America. There are more than 40 million laws that a person's supposed to live by. Ignorance is not a defense, okay? So if you don't know those 40 million, well, I broke it down to quite a few that most people deal with every day or could. And I came out to where I started understanding man's law better than the judges and the attorneys, You kind of come to a conclusion like that when you're bringing things out. And the judge of a district court, the 104th District Court, Taylor County, Texas, got up off his bench and he ran to his chamber, slammed the door behind him, and locked it. So I'd have to say that I know the law a little bit, okay? Man's law, enough that they fear. And I would they only knew our Heavenly Father's law. There's only, give or take, 613 laws that a man or woman or child should be keeping. You don't want to add to them or take away, but the ones that apply to you, you should be keeping with all your heart, soul, mind, and might to please our Father. That's the first greatest commandment in the law, is to love your Father with your whole heart, soul, mind, might, with every part of your DNA. You should raise your hands and praise our Father and want to please Him by not breaking any of the letters of His Word. And hopefully, if we do get Texas, and I say we because it's going to be a government like a family. I don't even know if money is going to be part of that, as money, you can see what it's done to the earth today. Everybody's out there for themselves, every one of them, individuals, wanting to make the best for themselves. But the way that I'm seeing what is to come on earth as it is in heaven, I guess you can say, because we're going to learn those laws, the rules that's being kept in heaven. Our Father don't let sinners come before him as being of his. Okay, Satan does go before our Father, or at least did, being the chiefest sinner of all. But our Father, he never follows anything that Satan has to tell him. But our Father's in control of Satan through Yahshua now. Satan was given to our Messiah. Our Messiah defeated her, and her minions have no place in the kingdom anymore, and they'll soon be cast down. Hopefully, we that are in Texas, if that's where we're going to be, we'll be setting up places like greenhouses and all sorts of wonderful things. And what's a man need to do? He needs to eat, okay? He needs a shelter over his head. Certainly, we'll provide those things, but we need to eat and take care of one another. That's the whole purpose of man. We're going to be reverting back to agriculture into husbandry as far as cattle and sheep and goats, and we're going to need people to be milking those and raising them, and together we're going to eat fabulously. And I'm going to show you at the place of gathering, if it is Texas, some of the things that I want you to dwell on. I want you to pray about these things and get into the scriptures and ask our King, for guidance. Like I say, I don't believe that money's going to do much for any of us, especially when everything that's going to be there in Texas is going to belong to our King, okay? It's not a personal thing. It's not a mine and that's a yours, so much from what I'm seeing. But everyone will have their chores. And then after the chores, we can use those things that our King has provided for us. He said he's going to gather us to a place he's provided for us. And I'm thinking here before too long, there may be a way, the door that opens, which I mentioned in the last video with Elon Musk there, or any other. Maybe it just hits the news and the government gets shamed enough that they look into it, investigate, as the book of Enoch says that they're going to. And so we need to provide, maybe in ahead of time, places where those that are going to be gathered or at least be able to have a place to stay. And I might be wrong with that. It may be all at once it's done and the things we need provided for us, but that's a little far-fetched for my brain to be able to reach out and realize. And that's why I've been considering and praying a lot, asking our King about it. And he's showing me things, but I don't know all the timelines or anything like that. There are things in these scriptures that our King hasn't let me see yet. I've read them many a time, but to understand them fully, it's not yet on some of them. And that's the timeline for these prophecies. And if any of y'all know them, please let me know, because I don't believe anybody. They've written about them for thousands of years, preachers writing books and everything about them today, and they're all incorrect. They're calling on lords and gods. They're calling on the Jesus, saying the laws are done away with and everything. These people are not the ones setting up for the remnant of the flock that's going to be gathered, and then all nations eventually flow to us. So anyway, let's read some scriptures here now that you got a little general idea of what's going on in my brain here and the way that I'm thinking that this may turn out. And if it don't, I'm not a prophet. I never said I'm a prophet. I didn't say thus, this is what's going to take place. I'm saying I really would that it would, because there's proof and evidence in the court record that I own Texas. And if we succeed from the nation, we'll have our own law. It will be under ecclesiastical reign, which means you go against the give or take 613 laws, which only define how to keep the Ten Commandments. You break any of them, then you're going to fall under the letter of the law. We're going to all be baptized before we start this work. Or I should say during the time, because, I've already been baptized, but I plan on being rebaptized. Those that come will be baptized and fully agree that by doing so, they have full right and reign to the land to live according by those give or take 613 laws that apply to them. It will be under ecclesiastical reign. We're not going to allow unclean things in there, and all the unclean things that are, we're going to cast them out. And everyone in Texas will have their choice. I'm sure you know that maybe those that are moving from, some other place, the Caribbean Isles or whatever, with a little shanty hut or something, might want to go ahead and contact us that are there saying, hey, we want to come. We have a hut here. We'd like to have a place there. Maybe someone wants to leave Texas because they want to eat bacon and always wanted to go to the Caribbean, We'll say, hey, okay, I'll trade my house for that house, and then boom, it's done, no money or anything like that needed to be exchanged. And that's just one way, of things that I've seen. But anyway, here, let's talk a little bit about what the scriptures say. And here in Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 23, it's speaking of the world as it is today. And it's also speaking of this remnant, the other 143,999 brothers of mine, as well as the children of the earth who have been listening to these words so they can prepare themselves to make a move, to a land where there's no law breaking. And if there is, it will be dealt with swiftly and according to the law. If someone's committing adultery, well, the man and the woman will be stoned. And by all the inhabitants of that area, they're all going to pick up a rock and hit him or her in the head or wherever. And thus they're going to get rid of the sin out of that land. And I know a lot of people, they have controversy thinking that anything like that could bring forth peace. Well, that's exactly what it's going to bring forth, because people are going to learn to love the law because we won't war anymore. And our Father's going to hear our prayers. So let's go ahead and consider Jeremiah 23, and please, I'm not going to read the whole thing here. There's other chapters and other books that I will, but I'm trying to keep this as short as possible at the same time, giving you hope and asking you to pray for the gathering and for the understanding of it and how we're going to provide by our King's hand. He's the provider to where we can set it up to where when people come, they'll have a job, a duty, whether teaching the children or building houses, making tents. I don't know what their job will be, but our King has been preparing them beforehand. He's been preparing you. You know what your set skills are. And if, of course, it's in deception, you're going to have to turn that around to where you have a set of skills in the truth. But anyway, here in Jeremiah 23, verse 1, it says, woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, says Yahweh. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, the Father of Israel, against the shepherds, the preachers, the priests, the pastors, and all those out there preaching falsely, saying the law is done away or whatever. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, the Father of Israel, against the shepherds who feed my people. You have scattered my flock, driven them away, and not attended to them. Behold, I will attend to you for the evil of your doing, says Yahweh. But I will gather the remnant. Please understand, where he speaks of remnant and such things as this, he's speaking of the 10 tribes being scattered all over the place. We were driven out instead of living in the land and learning our Father's ways. We were abandoned by those shepherds. Verse 3 says, but I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries where I have driven them and bring them back to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. And it's not talking about just having children. It's also talking of our words reaching ears of people out there to where they recognize our King's voice, and they too come to the understanding of the truth. And it says, I will set up shepherds over them who will feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, nor shall they be lacking, says the Father. And of course, I'd like to jump down here. You read the rest of this chapter. Jeremiah 23 verse 20 here says, the anger of Yahweh will not turn back until he has executed and performed the thoughts of his heart. Now get this, the latter days, talking of these days, you, speaking of the remnant, the 144,000, as well as those who hear us, you who might not be of the 144,000 yet, you hear what I'm saying, and that you have desired and are starting to keep the give or take 613 laws. Maybe you don't know all of them. Maybe you just found out about keeping the Sabbath today, but you knew you shouldn't steal or bear false testimony, and you were keeping those two. Well, congratulations. Now just keep the rest of them. Seek them out, and when you get convicted inside that you're doing wrong, confess your sins to our Heavenly Father through His righteous Son. Get yourself back up and get working righteously, and don't sin again, but you will. I tell you, each and every one of the laws that crept up on me 3-4 different ways, to where when I say I won't never do that again, well, it comes in a different style, in a different box, and I find myself neck up into it again, and I'm like, oh man. But I asked forgiveness, and our King knows I didn't intentionally do it. So I know I got the forgiveness, and I just keep on walking. But in the latter days, you are going to understand all these things, every word of the scriptures, and more. You're going to understand perfectly. And then he gets speaking again about the preachers and the liars out there. And I used to be a Canaanite Christian lying preacher myself, I know. But here in Jeremiah 23:21, I have not sent these prophets, yet they ran. I have not spoken to them, yet they prophesied. But if they had stood in my counsel and had caused my people to hear my words, then they would have turned them from their evil way and from the evil of their doings. Am I of a Father near at hand, says the Father, and not a Father afar off? Our Father's going to gather all nations to come before Him wherever the gathering's going to be at. Now here in Isaiah chapter 2, we'll start with verse 2. It says, now it shall come to pass when? In the latter days, that the mountain of Yahweh's house, the house of Yahweh, shall be established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above all the hills. Yeah, they've got these caterpillars going to come and locusts, and they're going to devour their fields, and they're going to feel it in their bellies. We're already in a shortage, my friends. So when we succeed from the world, emancipate from the world, and we set up the only righteous law on the land that we all will live with, it says all nations will flow to it. Many people will say, come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Father of Jacob, and He will teach us His ways. And how? Through His ambassadors, okay? The 144,000, the remnant and the children of the earth. And then everyone that comes is going to qualify to become part of our Father's family as well, okay? And each of you that come to that understanding, you're going to start teaching others as they come in. There's a number no man can count that's going to come out. And 144,000 of us alone teaching all them, it's not going to be easy. We need all the help we can get. And our Father's going to teach us His ways. We're going to show you His ways, and we shall walk in His paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, the give or take 613 laws, and the word, the every living word of your scriptures from the Father from Jerusalem. And again, please understand that our Father can put His name anywhere He wants to. He can call it Jerusalem, and He can call it Mount Zion. He can do what He wants. So don't be rock hard in your mind thinking that over there where they say is Jerusalem, and it may not have even been there. It may have been down in South Africa for all I know, and from research I've seen, and it doesn't matter. I look at the geology of the land the same as I do genealogies of those in my past or your past, or we're being called out to become brothers and sisters. That's what we're called out to be. Whether you're really dark or green or red or yellow or what, and I'm white, who cares? I got red towels in my bathroom, and they've been shedding all over in my tub. They're brand new. I got fuzz everywhere. But anyway, where they're gathered here, it says, He shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares. Yes, we're going to go out and start planting the fields, because everyone left on the earth is going to need us. And their spears and the pruning hooks. We're going to be planting trees and everything else, like the moringa tree. We'll be planting those all over the place like crazy, because they grow great in nasty soil, but they'll provide shade to where we may be able to grow some marvelous crops. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. All marvelous stuff. Ezekiel here, speaking of a time to come. Ezekiel 7 verse 17 says, every hand will be feeble, and every knee will be weak as water. I've felt these things the last few months, I'll tell you. They will also be girded with sackcloth. Horror will cover them. Shame will be on every face, and baldness on all their heads. Yeah, they're going to be bald. There's other places, like I think it's in Jeremiah or Jeremiah or Isaiah, where it speaks about how there's going to be a scab from the tops of their bald heads to the bottoms of their feet on these people that are going to be coming in or may have chosen to stay outside. But when they come, there will be healing. It says in verse 19 of Ezekiel 7, they will throw their silver into the streets and their gold will be like refuse, which is trash, garbage, a dishonorable thing to them. They want to get rid of it. It says their silver and their gold will not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of Yahweh. They will not satisfy their souls nor fill their stomachs, because it became a stumbling block of iniquity. So you see, they're going to be throwing out their money into the streets pretty soon. Think about it. What benefit is money if you've got no food in your belly? Are you going to keep going to work, making money when you can't even buy a piece of chicken or a head of lettuce from the store because there isn't any? And everything's been war raged and earthquakes taking place from our king's judgment, busting up the streets and everything else. Time's coming pretty soon. We're in a day's time. You'll see, I think it's a third or a quarter. I can't remember which. But I know there's a time where a third or a fourth of all the vessels on the oceans, the seas, on the waters will be destroyed. The same thing with that amount of the trees and of the grass and everything else. Boof, houses from an earthquake that's coming, and it's going to be severe. But what we're trying to set up is a place where this is going to take place, as shown here in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 12 says, Then Yahweh appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. Again, you can see that our Father could place his name wherever he wants to place his name. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, and this is going to take place as well as it was promised for those days. This is going to take place where we're gathered. Our Father says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to prayer made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. As for you, if you walk before me, as your father David walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and judgments, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom, as I covenanted with David your father, saying, you shall not fail to have a man as a ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot them from my land which I have given them, and this house which I have sanctified for my name I will cast out of my sight. And I will make it a proverb and a byword among peoples. And it explains that in the next two verses. Please put this on pause and read it. But once this uprooting from the land and the house being cast down, you've seen that already take place in history. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2 showed in the latter days that our Father is going to bring forth his house again, just like it was in Solomon's day. Please read the prayer of Solomon, because the same things are going to come into play in these latter days that are almost upon us. Well, we're already in them, but as far as the prophecy of the gathering such, that's almost upon us here. And of course, at this gathering, where it shows that there's going to be a lot of people rebuked, and there's going to be judgment between the nations, here in Psalms 149. Please read the whole thing, but it talks about, in verse 1, the praise in the assembly of the saints. This was a prophecy to come for the gathering that's to come. Here in verse 4 says, for the Father takes pleasure in his people. He will beautify the humble with salvation. Yes, we're going to humble ourselves and pray and ask our Father to heal us and our land, because we're pretty well broken down, and the land sucketh greatly in these last days. We're going to have to get it fertilized and everything for this number that no man can count that will eventually come out after the gathering. 5, let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing aloud on their beds. Let the high praises of Yahweh through Yahshua be in their mouth, and a two-edged sword in our hands, to execute vengeance on the nations and punishment on the peoples. Just like it talked in Isaiah 2:4 here, it says, he shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. This word of our Father, his ways, his paths, his laws are going to be taught where we're at. And when the people of the world, seeing what these Dr. Fuckies and this merciless ruler in Africa killing women and children and raping widows, and this president endorsing that we should be murdering our children, all these rulers, our king has brought up just as they've got to be right now in these days. But once everything crumbles, they're going to lose their worth, to where it shows here in verse 7, to execute vengeance on the nations and punishments on the peoples, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute on them the written judgment. This honor have all his 144,000, who our king is going to have set up as judges over all the matters of those who want to break the laws. Those who love the laws and commandments will never have to appear before any of us for a judgment unless you're a witness or whatever. And we're going to beg with everybody, please don't come before us. We don't want to have to put out a judgment on anyone, which is according to the give or take 613 laws that you promised and vowed by even baptism, forgiving you of your old ways and everything else to learn these new ways, and you chose to go against it. The judgment will be harsh. So don't make us have to judge. I'm begging everybody, please don't make us have to judge. Now here in Isaiah chapter 29, it's also speaking of the things that are coming and that we're already part there, but more so for these last days. These are prophecies. And of course, in the first verse, throws a lot of people off because they all believe that David lived in Jerusalem. And it says, woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add year to year, let feasts come around, yet I will distress Ariel. And there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be to me as Ariel. I will encamp against you all around. Now, our Father's speaking of what our King is going to be bringing, and already is in these last days. I'm sure you've seen the multitudes of refugees living in tents, having very little for food, doing absolutely nothing but existing. You should read the whole book of Isaiah and Jeremiah and read about how all these things here, you'll be punished by the Father of hosts with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire. The multitude of all nations who fight against Ariel, even all who fight against her and her fortress and distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. It shall even be as when a hungry man dreams and looks, he eats, but he awakes and his soul is still empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreams and look, he drinks, but he awakens, and indeed he is faint and his soul craves. So the multitude of all the nations shall be who fight against Mount Zion. See, now it changed from here for Ariel down to Mount Zion. But you must also consider that most people thought where Jerusalem was where David lived, but it turns out he lived in Ariel. David did go to Mount Zion, but so the multitude of all the nations shall be who fight against Mount Zion. Now you can say that this Mount Zion today are the 144,000 and the children of the earth. And the children of the earth, the number's always growing. Maybe not fast, but it does grow. And those who come against us, that's why the whole earth is trembling today, the volcanoes and everything else going off, because you all, my friends, my brothers and sisters, who are of this last great work, have been shamed and defamed and everything else by this world and the people of it. And our king's bringing the judgment on them for what they've done against you and against me. And these are some of the things that are coming down on their heads that I don't want you to be ignorant of. Here in Isaiah 29 verse 9 says, pause and wonder. Blind yourselves and be blind. They are drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with intoxicating drink. This speaking of the teachings they have. You ever watch the holy rollers out there, man? They'll throw themselves on the floor and roll around all over the place. Hillawaka, hoo, and they're all having just a great time, and they're all drunk as a skunk without having to drink anything. And in their teachings, they get this drunkenness to where they go to and fro, and they're tossed by every doctrine that comes on them. That's not going to be allowed where we're gathered. For Yahweh has poured out on you the spirit of deep sleep, and has closed your eyes, namely the prophets, and he has covered your heads, namely the seers. The whole vision has become to you like the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one who is literate, saying, read this, please. And he says, I cannot, for it is sealed. This is speaking of the scriptures. All the preachers of the world out there today, people are saying, here, read this. And they're open, oh yeah, well it says this. But they haven't any understanding of what they're reading. That's why they preach that it's okay to break the law and you'll go to heaven. Well, nobody's going to heaven, nor are you going to get salvation if you break the law, willfully, knowingly, or intentionally. Verse 12, then the book is delivered to one who is illiterate, saying, read this, please. And he says, I am not illiterate. Therefore, the Father said, inasmuch as these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but have removed their hearts far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the commandment of men, therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work among these people, a marvelous work and a wonder. Yes, there's going to be a gathering. You got all those people out there saying, I can't read this. I don't know what it says. There's no salvation in it to me. I know that if I kept it, I'd have a beautiful place and everything. And look, everything is falling apart. The bridges have collapsed. There's no food for my belly. Read this for me, will you? It's also going to be a time where they're false prophets or preachers and everyone else can go off hiding saying, no, I'm not preacher so-and-so. Oh, I know I look like Kenneth Copeland, but oh no, my daddy, he was a husbandman from birth and taught me to be a husbandman. No, I never preached a word at all. Therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work among this people, a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hidden. Woe to those who seek deep to hide their counsel far from the Father, and their works are in the dark. They say, who sees us and who knows us? Surely you have things turned around. Shall the potter be esteemed as the clay? For shall the thing made say of him who made it, he did not make me? Or shall the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding? And then again, get into reading the rest of this here chapter. Last verse, of course, showing there is hope. It says in verse 24, these also who erred in spirit will come to understanding, and those who complained will learn doctrine. So let's go to chapter 30. And please understand, we all come out of Egypt, each and every one of us, before we come to the true understanding of the truth, before we actually realize we do have a king who expects us to keep the give or take 613 laws, to walk exactly as he walked, and that he didn't come to do it all for you. No, he came to show you how you are to do it yourself. We all were part of Egypt at one time. And as Revelation 12 verse 9 says, the whole world is deceived. They're all deceived. but they have to be. It's what has shaped us to be who we are today, to where we take the counsel of our Father here, even on our King's channel. And we believe and live by his every living word. We're not of that deception anymore, and we're growing closer to our King every day. But it says here in Isaiah 31, it says, "Woe to the rebellious children, says the Father, who take counsel, but not of me, and who devise plans, but not of my Spirit, that they may add sin to sin." And keep in mind, the United States and the other nations today, where they're going, so you can see more clearly of what this is speaking of in the time frame, who walk to go down to Egypt and have not asked my advice to strengthen themselves in the strength of the Pharaoh or the leaders of the land, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Democracy, the republics, everything out there they've got. Totalitarianisms, Nazism, whatever. Therefore the strength of Pharaoh shall be your shame, and trust in the shadow of Egypt shall be your humiliation, for his princes were at Zone, and his ambassadors came to Hanes. I always wondered why they came up with the name of Hanes for my britches. They were all ashamed of a people who could not profit them, or be help or benefit, but a shame and also a reproach. I mean, think about it. Half the world today's on welfare or whatever, being paid not to work. I myself am on, disability, because they broke me while I was out there. I got busted. Our King made sure of it, so I would have all that extra time to study these scriptures. Everything's in our King's control. This is the burden against the beasts of the south, though through a land of trouble and anguish, from which came the lioness and the lion, the viper and fiery flying serpent. They will carry the riches on the backs of young donkeys, and their treasure on the humps of camels, to a people who shall not profit. For the Egyptians shall help in vain, and to no purpose. Therefore I have called her Rahab Shem Shebeth, which they say literally means Rahab sits idle. Now this is speaking to all the earth, all those that are deceived today. It says, "Now go, write it before them on a tablet, and note it on a scroll, that it may be for a time to come, forever and ever." So the time's going to come that it's going to take these things, and it's going to go on forever and ever. That this is a rebellious people, lying children who will not hear the law of Yahweh, who say to their seers, "Do not see," and to the prophets, "Do not prophesy to us right things. Speak to us smooth things. Prophesy deceits. Get out of the way. Turn aside from the path. Cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us." That's what they're wanting these preachers out there today to be doing, and they're doing it. "Therefore thus says the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word, and trust in oppression and perversity, and rely on them." I mean, look at what just took place with the first horseman going out there. Had the coronavirus, the crown, corona, on its head. Without an arrow, he conquered, and came to conquer, he conquered. Everyone was, and still is, in shutdown, okay? They're oppressed. And there's a lot of perversity going on in Shanghai today. Have you seen it? And the people rely on these things. "Therefore this iniquity shall be to you like a breach ready to fall, a bulge in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly and in an instant. And he shall break it like the breaking of the potter's vessel, which is broken in pieces. He shall not spare. So there shall not be found among its fragments a shard to take fire from the hearth, or take water from the cistern. For thus says Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel, in returning," do you get this, my friends, my brothers, my sisters? "In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength, but you would not." You should, okay? I'm doing this. I hope that you will too. I hope you'll be returning and rest on the Sabbath so you can be saved. And it says, "And you said, No, for we will flee on horses, therefore you shall flee. And we will ride swift on horses, therefore those who pursue you shall be swift. 1,000 shall flee at the threat of one, at the threat of 5 you shall flee. till you are left as a pole on top of a mountain, as a banner on a hill. Then we're heading to the territory where it shows that Yahweh will be pardonable. He'll bring forth a pardon and acquittal through Yahshua our King. Isaiah 30:18, therefore the Father will wait, that he may be pardonable to you, and therefore he will be exalted, that he may have mercy on you. For the Father is the Father of justice. Blessed are all those who wait for him. For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem, and our Father will put his name wherever he wants to. It was uprooted with Solomon. The temple's been destroyed. And it shows here in these scriptures, in this video, and others as well, that our Father's going to place his name someplace again, and our King's going to gather us there. For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem. You shall weep no more. He will be very pardonable to you. At the sound of your cry, when he hears it, he will answer you. I was telling you that most of the time you pray, you don't get no answer today. Sure, there's some times that probably stick out in your head if you've been, praying for the last 62 years as I've been doing. And I can recall a couple times where it seemed like, boom, instantly I had prayer answered, but most all the others I'm still waiting, for an answer. But here, when we're gathered at Zion, when we cry out to him and humble ourselves, he's going to hear us. And though the Father gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teachers will not be moved into a corner anymore, like it talked about in Jeremiah chapter 23. And how the shepherds, they left the flock, and the flocks are men, the sheep are men, and they left. They were removed from the corner they were put in to teach from. But here at this gathering that takes place, it says, yet your teachers will not be moved into a corner anymore, but your eyes shall see your teachers. Your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And that's all our brothers and sisters where we're gathered. If you see someone that's walking outside of the give or take 613 laws, you bring it up to their minds or attention, saying, hey, this is the way you're to walk in it. And if they don't repent, then you're supposed to bring a witness, bring it up to them again. And then if they won't listen, then it's to be brought up to those that are set in the offices of the judges to tell these guys, hey, look, you don't want to live by that. We're going to tar and feather you and throw your butt out there in the desert. So that your friends out there outside of our great nation, our Father's house, the house of Yahweh, Texas, you're no longer welcome here. And depending, of course, if it's real, that's just teaching lies or whatever. But if they're committing adultery or whatever, they'd be put to death. Well, not again. Once you're put to death, that's it. But anyway, it says here in verse 22, you will also defile the covering of your images of silver and the ornament of your molded images of gold. You will throw them away as an unclean thing. You'll say to them, get away. And it's talking to the crucifixes and your medallions supposed to bring you good luck and all that sort of stuff. This is your images of silver. These are your gods and your idols. You're going to want to get rid of them once you come to the true understanding. And then it says, then he will give the rain for your seed, with which you sow the ground, and bread of the increase of the earth. It will be fat and plentiful. In the day your cattle will feed in large pastures. Likewise, the oxen and young donkeys that work the ground will eat cured fodder, which has been winnowed with the shovel and fan. There will be on every high mountain and every high hill rivers and streams of water in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. Now, I don't know if I've told all of you. I've told a couple of y'all. There are two of the world's largest aquifers. We're talking well water that are pretty equal in size. One is actually under the land of Israel, and the other, the second largest, is under Texas, specifically under Clyde and Abilene, under Taylor and Callahan and Coleman and Shackelford counties. That area is the world's largest, or one of the world's largest out of two of the largest aquifers on the earth today. That's where they're located. And yes, we're going to drill and we're going to have streams of water that are going to be out there for the fields to grow with and everything. And Texas is going to be turned around, and we'll probably even sell oil to the nations. We'll have to see. Verse 25 again, there will be on every high mountain and on every high hill rivers and streams of waters in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. So the way I'm seeing this is we're going to be preparing, somebody is, okay, going to be preparing and having these streams of water and such already coming forth on the great day of slaughter. These things are already be taken care of. And when the towers fall, all nations are going to flow to us. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days. It's going to get hotter than hell. We're going to need all these moringa trees and such planted to give some shade from the fields being withered, while the rest of the earth is going to really suffer. We'll be protected, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold, 7 times hotter as the light of 7 days in 1 day's time. And the day that the Father binds up the bruise of his people, when they finally come into where there's healing, where they humble themselves and pray, and heals the stroke of their wound. And then the judgment of Assyria. Behold, the name of Yahweh comes from afar, bringing with his anger. Behold, the name of Yahweh comes from afar, burning with his anger. And his burden is heavy. His lips are full of indignation, and his tongue is like a devouring fire. His breath is like an overflowing stream which reaches up to the neck, to sift the nations with the sieve of futility. And there shall be a bridle in the jaws of the people, causing them to err. You can see the spirits again, my friends, that bring these scriptures about. These spirits are bringing them into the churches, the lands and the nations out there following gods and trying to justify it, saying that it's actually Father Yahweh and all these other things, but it's all for our Father's purpose. And it says, verse 29, you shall have a song, as in the night when a holy festival is kept, and gladness of heart is when one goes with the flute to come to the mountain of Yahweh. We read about that in Isaiah 2, remember? To the mighty one of Israel, the Father will cause his glorious voice to be heard and show his descent of his arm. And the descent of his arm is Yahshua, our mighty King, with the indignation of his anger, in a flame of devouring fire, with scattering tempest and hailstones. Have you seen the news lately, my friends? Our King has come. He's bringing all these things upon the earth to let them know the salvation is here. It's at the door. For though the voice of the Father, for through the voice of Yahweh, through Yahshua, Assyria will be beaten down as he strikes with the rod. And it's an interesting way that it's going to come. Please listen. This is our Father's way on those that hate him. And in every place where the staff of punishment passes, which the Father lays on him, it will be with tambourines and harps. And in battles of brandishing, he will fight with it. For Tophet was established of old, yes, for the king is prepared. He has made it deep and large. Its pyre is fire with much wood. The breath of Yahweh, like a stream of brimstone, kindles it. So please, further reading in this, it looks like the time is up here for me, because I'm sure y'all want to go eat or do something. But this is all a continuation in this prophecy, in these prophecies that are going to come. Here in Isaiah 31:2, for instance, it says, yet he also is wise and will bring disaster, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of evildoers and against the help of those who work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men, and they're not immortal like Father Yahweh, and their horses are flesh and not spirit. When the Father stretches out his hand, which is Yahshua as well, both he who helps will fall, and he who is helped will fall down. They all will perish together. It's going to be a horrible time, my friends, to the point where everyone that comes to the gathering here in verse 7 shows, for in that day every man shall throw away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, sin, which your own hands have made for yourselves. And yes, a number that no man can count is going to come out of this. So please, everybody, pray. Let's get ourselves prepared If you got spare time and you're not in the scriptures, then learn how to cultivate things. We're going to need people to grow all the lettuce and everything that we need, the tomatoes, cabbages, to where we can provide for a number that no man can count. And it's going to be blessed, my friends, my brothers, my sisters. So pray about these things. Put some of your thoughts down there in the comments. Pray about this. Pray for one another. And above all, love our Father and His righteous Son by keeping the give or take 613 laws. Those who refuse to do so won't know what this greatest work is going to actually be like in these last days, because they won't be allowed. And with that, I love you all. Bye.